So about a decade ago, there was a woman named Dr. Anne Graybiel at MIT who's a neurologist. And for years, she had been doing experiments to try and get sensors into the craniums of rats so that she could measure what was going on inside their heads as they went about their daily business. As you can imagine, it took a long time and a lot of rats to figure out how to do this. But eventually, she got to a point where she could get about 150 sensors into a rat's cranium. And she would do the same thing with every single rat. After the surgery, she would take them and she would put them in the world's simplest maze. This maze works the same way every single time. There's a click, the partition moves, and the rat is free to run up and down. Now, if anyone's ever done this with a rat, what you know is that when you drop a rat in a maze like this, it looks like the world's stupidest animal. The rat will actually sort of run up and down the center aisle and sniff and scratch. They'll get to the end and it'll actually see the chocolate and then go the opposite direction. This is actually one of the reasons why rats are used in experiments, is because it's considered that if you can teach a rat something, you must be able to teach any animals anything. And so she would do this experiment, but for the first time, she was able to see what was going on inside the rat's head. This is a simplified neurological graph of the first time that a rat is dropped in this maze. And what you'll notice is that its brain is actually working hard the entire time. So when the rat would scratch on the walls, its scratching centers would light up. When it would sniff, its sniffing centers would light up. The rat was actually trying to process as much information as possible. This is what learning looks like. So Dr. Graybiel takes the rats, each one, she drops them in 100 times, 150 times. And as you imagine, over time, the rats learn how to navigate through the maze faster and faster and faster. Click, partition moves, the rat will make a beeline to the chocolate. It actually becomes a habit. But what's really interesting is that Dr. Graybiel sees for the first time what's going on inside the rat's cranium. As the rat gets faster and faster, as the habit to find the chocolate becomes stronger and stronger, the rat essentially thinks less and less and less. This graph at the bottom is a simplified neurological graph of the 150th iteration of a rat running through a maze. And that dip you see right there, that's the same dip that you would see if a rat went to sleep. Now, there was a scientist at Duke University a couple of years ago who did a study to try and figure out how much of your day was habits. She followed a whole bunch of people around. And she found that about 40 to 45% of the actions we take every day aren't really behaviors. They're actually just habits. And if I could somehow stick 150 sensors into your head, which I would not recommend, then when I saw you backing your car out of your driveway or walking down the hall and muttering to yourself or making automatic decisions, I would see your brain looking like this. But what's interesting is if you notice, there's these two spikes in neurological activity, right? When there's the click, we see a burst of neurological activity, and then essentially the brain kind of almost goes to sleep. And then the rat finds the chocolate, and it's as if the brain sort of wakes itself up again to pay attention to what's going on. This is the neurological signature of a habit. This is what we've discovered in the last 6 years. And this is so important that it's become enshrined in psychology and neurology as what's known as the habit loop. We now know that every habit has 3 components. There's a cue, which is like a trigger for an automatic behavior to start. And then there's a routine, which is the behavior itself. And then finally, a reward. And the reward is how your brain, and in particular a part of your brain named the basal ganglia, learns to remember this pattern for the future. And for centuries, when people thought and talked about habits, they always focused on the routine, on the behavior. But what we've learned is that it's actually the rewards and the cues that shape how habits work. That's how we influence how people behave on the most automatic, almost subconscious level. Just to give you an example, let me tell you about an experiment that was done in Germany where they took about 700 people and they wanted to get them to exercise. So they took one group and they told them to choose a cue, like go running at the same time every day, or always put your clothes next to your bed. And then they told them that when they got home from working out, they should eat a small piece of chocolate, which of course is counterintuitive because we all exercise in order to lose weight, not to eat chocolate. But what they found, and the reason why they found this, is that people who did this exercised twice as much habitually as other people. And the reason why is because you might think that you want to exercise, but your brain thinks that you are a dirty liar and that you hate exercise. And so in order to convince your basal ganglia that you should actually form this habit, you have to pair the activity with a reward you genuinely enjoy, like chocolate. And over time, your brain will learn the endorphins, the endocannabinoids, the neurotransmitters that are released by physical activity are a pleasurable sensation, and you'll start exercising habitually and you'll stop eating the chocolate on your own. If you learn this science, if you try and share this science with your employees or with your customers, with your families or with your coworkers, you have this capacity to change lives. We understand now how habits work for the first time. When you teach people to diagnose the cues and the rewards in their life, you give them this tool to change these small patterns that they feel powerless against otherwise, including all of us. And I hope that this is something that is useful to you as you strive to make the world a better place.